No, this was no boating accident. It wasn't a propeller, wasn't a coral reef, and it wasn't Jack the Ripper. It was a 45. So what we have here on the table are two top quality, in my opinion, beautiful, extremely well designed, well made handguns, both in 45 ACP, probably my favorite caliber. These guns have a lot of things in common, and they have a lot of differences between them as well. So it's kind of a fun comparison. It's always a fun comparison. Let's admit, it's always a fun comparison whenever you say, here's two guns, compare them and shoot them and do all that fun stuff. But this is a particularly fun comparison because we have so many things that are the same and so many things that are different between these two guns. So let's look at some of the things that these two guns have in common. Right? They have a lot of similarities. One, maybe, one of the most obvious similarities, if you were to just look at them laying on a table, they're both hammer fired, right? So they both have external hammers. They're both double action, single action, which means that first trigger pull can pull the hammer all the way back, cock it, and then release it. And then subsequent shots, after the slide works, would then be the lighter single action pull. They are both 10-round magazines, so they both have a 10+1 capacity. I'll compare those magazines as well. They both have some of the features that we all come to expect now. They both have Picatinny rail in the front for a light or other mounted accessory. They both have a good usable amount of rail. The HK45 actually has longer rail, but they both have about the same amount of space for a device. One of the things they both have in common is not necessarily something most of us consider to be a positive thing these days, and that is they both have a pretty high bore axis. I'll talk more about that later. And last but not least, definitely not least, another thing they both have in common, even though they both have foreign names, they're both made in the USA. Okay, average. 10 pounds, 10 ounces, average. Alright, 5 pulls, single action. 5 pounds, 14 ounce average. And 5. Our average of 5, double action, 10 pounds, 5.5 ounces. Average, 4 pounds, 11.7 ounces. Good. Double action pull on the HK45 is really smooth. It's about 10 pounds, 10.5 pounds. There's a little bit of a, somewhere in the middle of that stroke, there's a little bit of a, hey, what's going on here feeling, but then it resumes its normal feel to the break point. It's a good long stroke like you would expect with a double action. Very smooth, and I find that my sights stay really pretty well on target. I'm able to put pretty nice groups in a target even with double action. All right, where were we? 6 Sauer, double action only. One thing that I really like with the SIG decocking lever is it's easy to manipulate that with my support hand thumb. Never have to break my grip. SIG Sauer P227 H&K HK45, side by side or head to head as they happen to be at the moment. They have a lot of things in common, as I've mentioned, but they also have obviously a lot of differences. A couple of obvious differences right off the bat. The SIG has an aluminum frame. The HK has a polymer frame. One of the other key differences between these two pistols is sort of the design cues that they took, or the design approach that the engineers took in designing them. And it's sort of a thinner, taller versus stouter and shorter approach. The HK45 is a thinner pistol, but much taller, whereas the SIG is a little more rotund, but much shorter. So, you know, depending on your preference there, you will definitely notice the difference between these two pistols. We'll take closer looks at that. But here's just a quick look, without me trying to be too scientific about it. You can see how much taller the HK is, but you may also be able to see that the SIG is a little rounder. You definitely feel that from an ergonomics perspective when you shoot both of these guns. The HK45 is easily made into a completely left-handed pistol. It is nearly ambidextrous out of the box. The slide stop, slide release lever that you see here is ambidextrous, right hand and left hand. And because the HK45 has the European style paddle mag release in the trigger guard on both sides, that's already ambidextrous. So the only thing you would have to do to make this pistol completely left-handed would be to move the safety lever over to the other side, which you can do. So HK45 is essentially ambidextrous out of the box. It can be fully left-handed if you want to move that safety over. SIG Sauer, not so much. SIG Sauer left-handers need not apply as far as SIG is concerned, and that's not completely true, of course. That doesn't, you know, you can reverse the mag catch, so the mag release button can be reversed for left-handers. However, the slide stop, slide release control, and the decocker control cannot be reversed. So it's only ever going to be partially ambidextrous or partially left-handed. So again, you know, I've already pointed out one of the key differences too between these two pistols is the SIG has the traditional American style push button magazine release right here behind the trigger, and it's a really nice one. It's a very large button. It's made of aluminum, and it's got great checkering on it. It's easy to push, easy to reach, extremely good control. The HK45 has the European style paddle controls. You can see them here at the bottom of the trigger guard on either side. This allows you, right-handed or left-handed, full control. Now I find actually when I'm shooting this gun, you know, I don't have giant hands, And that's a long reach for me. You know, a normal magazine button would be somewhere around here. So that extra almost inch of reach is a little more than than is comfortable for me. So I find that what I'm doing is I'm using my trigger finger to drop the mag, using the other side. But it's great because you do have that choice. I talked about the fact that both of these have a hammer drop. However, HK45 also incorporates a safety into their control. So, hammer back on the HK45, just like a 1911, you can push that control up and then safety is on. Safety's on, trigger will not work, right? So you can have a truly cocked and locked situation with the HK. What they've added is, take the safety off, then you go down one more and you drop the hammer. SIG Sauer has long had the hammer drop control. They approach it a little differently. It's a separate control dedicated to only dropping the hammer, and it's this sort of slide down lever right here that you see on the SIG. And you've got to pretty much get it all the way to the bottom, and then it drops the hammer safely, as does the HK. Both of these drop the hammer in a safe way. One thing I've noticed between the two of them, though, the SIG Sauer drops the hammer pretty gently. When the HK drops the hammer, it'll let you know about it. So if you're sneaking up on somebody and you got to drop your hammer, you're probably better off with the SIG than an HK. Otherwise, you're going to announce yourself. Alright, that was the SIG. HK45 with Remington UMC, 25 yards. Okay, 25 yards, Remington UMC. First target here is the SIG Sauer P227. Next, H&K HK45. What a horrible thing, huh? I have to take both of these guns out to the range and shoot them both and really mess around with them both to have to try and just do the comparison, talk about what's different, what's the same, what might be better, what might be not as good. It's a tough job, but somebody's got to do it. And I'm just the man to step up. We've talked about a lot of the similarities and we've talked about several of the differences. There are a couple other things of sort of distinction between these two pistols. And one of the things you can kind of see at this angle, let me turn these pistols a little bit more this way. Big difference between the sights on these two guns. So they kind of approach these sights a little differently. The HK45, which is here on the left, has sort of a Novak style rear sight, very much in that type of design. It's very sloped, very snag-free type of design. It is a polymer sight. It's dovetail fit. Then the front sight is a blade that is about maybe 3/8 of an inch long and is also polymer. You have a 3-dot configuration. I'll show that in a minute. They are not night sights. I don't know what you'd call them. I mean, when I was younger, we would just call them glow in the dark. The sights on the HK45 absorb ambient light, whether it be daylight or artificial light, and then they glow for a time in darkness using that stored light. They do not glow under their own power. There is no tritium or any other substance or source of natural luminescence. So, after a period of time, these sights are just as dark in the night as the rest of the pistol. The SIG, on the other hand, does use tritium night sights. The SIG P227 is equipped with tritium night sights. The sights are a little different. They are a more traditional SIG. If you're familiar with SIGs, P226s, this is the same type of sight. Just the opposite of snag-free. This sight is actually made so that it can be used in an emergency to run the slide. The front sight is about the same length as the HK. It's about 3/8 of an inch, maybe a little longer. This one might be closer to a 1/2 inch length. But both of these have a 3-dot combat sight picture. Turn it around this way. We can see the sight picture. Both pistols, 3 dots. They both have very good sight picture. Both very easy to acquire, very easy to hold. Great sights. The HKs are a little more yellow to the eye. These are a little more of a dull white. Again, these are tritium. So when the lights go out, these will glow under their own power for about a decade or so before they go dark. These have to have ambient light charge them. The good news is if you do charge them up, man, they are killer bright for a while. Much brighter than tritium sights or any other type of night sights, because the glow-in-the-dark properties that these sights have are really good. But again, very temporary. So I consider them to be not as good. I consider them to be of lesser value than true night sights with their own power source. Both of these guns have double action, single action triggers. Contrary to what some people will say, the P227 does not, out of the box, have the short reset trigger. They will sometimes, SIG even will sometimes refer to it as SRT, which is, I think, a little misleading. And what they're really saying is short reach trigger, not short reset trigger. And again, I think that's a little misleading. Okay, with the hammer back fully cocked on the SIG P227 trigger, you've still got a decent amount of take up. And then you've got a really nice break. It might be a little heavier, but it's still really nice. Now the double action, not a whole lot of take up. You can see right there, a little bit, and then, you know, you've got that very smooth, heavy, even and consistent double action pull, and then a really nice break. It's not a bad trigger. It's not the best trigger in the world. It's not nearly as good as the true SRT, the short reset trigger for SIG Sauer. So the trigger on the P227, no major complaints, but it's not the best. It's not the greatest. It could use some improvement. Trigger on the HK45, also double action, single action, comes in a little lighter on my gauge. The trigger comes back a little further when it's fully cocked than it does on the SIG. Still got a relatively decent amount of take up here, and then a good break. No over travel. Now our double action, it's way out there. And again, it's 10 pounds, 5.5 ounces, so just under 10.5 pounds. It's less smooth than the SIG Sauer's double action. You got a little bit of a kind of a false positive about halfway Right there. Did you hear that? So it leads you to believe it's not quite as smooth as the SIG. SIG's is a little bit smoother. It's consistent, feels the same all the way back. The HK has that little hiccup about halfway. But by no means is it a bad trigger. I talked a little bit before about the tall versus short and round versus thin difference, and that is one of the most significant differences between these two guns. If you really want to see these differences, the best way to demonstrate that is to really just look at the two magazines. Let me move these guns out of the way. All right, here's the SIG on the right, HK on the left. You can see the differences in magazines that really illustrate the difference in height of the gun. And there's not a whole lot of difference in the width of the magazine or even the design style. SIG starts to taper a little further down and there's a more gradual taper where HK tapers much more closely to the top. They're both staggered. They're both close to the same width. But that's really a big difference. And now, here's something that'll really help demonstrate the difference between these two guns. If you look at the base plate on these magazines, this really does a good job of showing you the design philosophy differences between the two. So the P227, the one here that says P227 on it, rounder and shorter. HK45, which is the one that says HK45, thinner and taller. As far as quality, as far as fit and finish goes, fit and finish of both of these pistols is just about perfection, in my opinion. I really can't say one is significantly better than the other, you know. You can make a difference, you can make an argument for, you know, why aluminum is better than polymer or vice versa. And obviously those are different materials, both done extremely well. Both of the pistols have a really good and durable coating on the steel surfaces. Good stuff. Good stuff. The HK45. As far as durability and reliability, I haven't got enough rounds through either of these pistols to make any kind of statement that would be meaningful about durability or reliability. I will tell you, neither of these has malfunctioned ever, and I've fed them all kinds of different ammo, including my own hand loads. So time will tell. You know, and neither of these has been around a really long time. The HK45 is a more mature model than the P227, but the P227 is built on the P226 platform, and obviously that's been around and proven itself time and time again. So reliability and durability, I'd say, in both cases, for me at least, too early to tell, but all indications are dead equal. Now, one thing I will demonstrate, let me put a snap cap in the HK45 and load it. And if we look down at the pistol, shooter's point of view, you can see there's a very, very thin red line. That is your loaded chamber indicator. It's essentially just the extractor pushed out, as all extractors typically are, with a little bit of red paint there to catch your attention. We'll put that round in the SIG. No paint, no red line. The SIG Sauer gives you a little bit of a nice beveled magwell with that E2 grip, and that's really the grip. The grip is providing that extension there, that polymer E2 grip. Gives you a nice magwell. HK, pretty much your basic plain flat-sided magwell. Not a whole lot going on there. So, favor the SIG on magwell. I talked about both of these having a high bore axis. And if you look, you see both of the firing pins there. They are just about dead even, I think. Let me get around here. I think they're just about dead even, these two guns, as far as bore axis goes from the web of your hand. I could try to measure that, but my eye tells me they're about the same. Well, I made it all the way up to the bore axis. There's a little thin up here, but wow, the view is incredible. There's a lot I like about both of these guns. There's very little that I dislike about either one, but they're very different ergonomically. I'm going to focus probably more on the thin versus round, because that's really what you're going to mostly feel the difference of. So with the HK45, you've got that, again, narrower but deeper grip. So the distance between the web of your hand and the trigger is going to be further than it is on the SIG by a little bit. But again, it's thinner. So I think the circumference is very close. But it comes down to preference of feel. You got finger grooves in the front of the grip. Again, we've got our Batman print. We've got a nicely stippled frame. Provides pretty good grip overall. I haven't had this thing out on a hot summer day with a lot of humidity and sweaty hands. When I do, I might wonder, whether this thing needs a Talon grip on it or something. Kind of hate to put one on just because I hate to cover up that nice looking grip. Aesthetically, I love it. Okay, the SIG, again, a little rounder, a little stouter, but shorter, but also has a really, really nice feel to it. Again, distance from the web of my hand to the trigger feels like it's a little bit shorter with the SIG. The gun is rounder, so you feel more like you're holding the baseball bat than a 2x4. That's kind of the difference. Would you prefer to hold a baseball bat or a 2x4? But the E2 grip on the SIG P227 is really, really phenomenal. The front checkering in that aluminum frame on the front strap, really, really good. The trigger guard is really well undercut, nicely undercut on the P227, more so than on the HK45. Now on a hot summer day, the P227 has already got you covered, because this E2 grip will stick to your hand regardless of how sweaty or how wet your hand gets. So there's definitely an advantage to the grip on the P227. All right, while I'm wiping these down after a fun day at the range, let me show you one of the other small differences between the HK45 and the P227. And that is their takedown methods, slightly different, and some of the innards are slightly different. Okay, so with the HK45, the way you take this down, you want to drop the magazine, then you want to cock the hammer just to get it out of your way. I like to put the safety on because you can, and if you can, you might as well. That keeps you from accidentally dropping the hammer. Push that through. There's a pin that you push on, and voila. Now here's the other half of the slide lock lever, and we can either we can either leave that in, or we can remove it. If we're going to clean the pistol, we want to probably remove it and clean it. One of the other main differences with the HK, nylon sleeve that rides over the guide rod and recoil spring assembly. So if we remove the guide rod assembly and pop the barrel out real quick, let me just give it a quick wipe because it's pretty dirty. One of the other key differences is, or one of the unique traits of the HK, is this O-ring. Near the front end of the barrel, it's recessed into a groove that is cut for it. It protrudes just a few thousandths of an inch. And the purpose of this O-ring is also to steady the barrel during the breaking of the shot. So this O-ring is designed to act in a similar way as a bushing on a 1911 or other similar pistols of a Browning design. The O-ring is a heat-resistant material, and HK does include, it was either 3 or 4 additional replacements with the pistol. So over time that will wear, but that's something you want to keep well lubricated. I like to keep grease all the way around that. Reassembling the pistol is pretty much the reverse of disassembly. We just replace our pin. And there we go. One of the things I do really like about the safety, the way they designed it for the HK45, is that you, with the safety on, you can manipulate the slide. You can do basically anything except pull the trigger and drop the hammer. So you saw you can actually disassemble the pistol with the safety engaged, which is a really nice feature. So SIG P227, a little more familiar and traditional. And here we see a very traditional guide rod recoil spring assembly. It is a sort of a semi-captured spring. And then of course our barrel. No O-ring or anything on the SIG. Another difference you'll see, of course, with the SIG is you have full-length rails on the frame. And of course, again, this is an aluminum frame. Here's the weight of an unloaded SIG P227 with an empty magazine. £2, almost exactly. 2 pounds and 0.10 ounces. Now, HK45, also with an empty magazine. £1, 15.2 ounces. So you've got about 0.9 ounces less weight in the HK45. Alright guys, well hey, I know this was a long video. I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you hanging in there with me. You paid your money, you made your popcorn, you sat down, you watched this long comparison, and you probably want to know which one of these two guns is the best. Well, I can tell you without a doubt, the best one is So when you're out at the range with the Heckler & Koch HK45 and the SIG Sauer P227, you know what that means. It's hammer time. Yeah, those of you from the 90s will remember that one.